Hello and welcome to a new video. Today I'll be ranting and rambling about Fallout 76 and Bethesda. Let's begin. Bethesda is a bit of an enigma in the gaming industry, for no other reason than the fact that gamers are so lenient when it comes to all the bugs and glitches in the game. The only time you see people be lenient about that stuff is when they're speedrunning a game and the bugs and glitches allow them to get through faster. But if you're just playing a game normally and you run into a bug and glitch and it doesn't make you laugh or anything, it's not amusing, it's just frustrating and interrupts gameplay, the developer is going to be catching some shit for that from the community. Ubisoft caught shit for all the bugs and glitches in their game, Assassin's Creed Unity, which hurt sales for the later Assassin's Creed Syndicate, and the pushback was so bad they delayed Assassin's Creed Origins for a year rather than sticking to their yearly release schedule. Madmind Studio on the indie side of things released Agony, which was, among other things, incredibly buggy, and they caught a bunch of flack for that. So whether like AAA or an indie studio, you're going to get shit for releasing a buggy game, and I think it's worse if a AAA studio releases a buggy game, given just how many resources they have on them, just available to them. Now, Bethesda is a AAA video game studio. They are about as large a studio they could be without releasing their own consoles like Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo. They have all the time they will need. They have all the money they would need. And they certainly have all the resources they would need. And yet, 3 years after Fallout 4 was released, they released Fallout 76, and it's actually more broken than Fallout 4 was. It's an absolute mess. It's a mess, and there's so many just core intrinsic gameplay design elements that are so fundamentally wrong that even if it wasn't a buggy mess, it would still be shitty. And apparently this is something that a lot of people agree with, more so than they would with Fallout 4. But why has Bethesda been able to slip by for so long? Skyrim was incredibly buggy. Fallout 3 was incredibly buggy. Fallout 4 had a ton of glitches and bugs in it. Well, one of the biggest reasons, if not the biggest reasons, especially for the PC crowd, was the modding community. When Bethesda releases a new game and they're unable or unwilling to do a quality assurance test, the modding community would release patches and fixes for the game that people can download in order to make the game run properly. This has worked for a while now, and something people even wait before buying a Bethesda game to come out just so they can play a stable game the moment it's, purchased. However, Bethesda and the modding community has sort of drifted apart over the years. A few years back, Bethesda announced the Creation Club, which is this system where modders would be able to submit their mods to Bethesda to put on their online store and be sold to consumers, and the modders would be able to get a little bit of money from that. The problem is people will then have to pay real world money for these fake in-game monies in order to buy stuff from this in-game store. as opposed to the old system where the mods were just free and the modders were paid through donations. It was, if nothing else, a hobby that could eventually score some cash, but it wasn't necessarily something you can live off of. It wasn't going to put bread on the table every single day. But with the Creation Club and this idea of paid mods, that earned a lot of ire from the community, but seemed to have subsided. But then Fallout 76 comes out, and you're not even able to modify the game at its release. Whatever state the game is released in, you're stuck with that, and there's no hope for reprieve or any sort of fix from a much more able, willing, and just general smarter source of fixes than Bethesda and its crew is able to come up with. So I wonder if a lot of the ire is just people who are now playing a Bethesda game without these fixes for long enough to say, holy shit, this company really is awful at their job. Why did I support them for so long? Could very well be that case. Another reason for this is it's a Fallout game that's a multiplayer, quote-unquote PvP. It has no actual character NPCs. Its main quest is as barren as possible. Its quests in general are literally just go to place, grab thing, maybe listen to recording, and then you're done. There's no intricacy to them. There's nothing like the missions in Fallout New Vegas, or like the mission where you have to help those ghouls launch themselves in a rocket into some great beyond as part of a pilgrimage, or help Boone figure out who killed his wife or sold his wife into slavery, or just even the mild quests, even the silly quests, even the Fallout 76S quest of go to place and you would talk to thing or person if they actually existed, were more fun in New Vegas. The one where you have to find those prostitutes for that one Atomic Tango bar, for example, or was it the Atomic Wrangler? That's it. That quest was a lot more memorable than a lot of the quests Bethesda were able to come up with. And I would say not just in Fallout 76, but also Fallout 4, which is riddled with very pointless quests, including the absolute scourge of RPGs, Radiant quests. But the reason the whole new direction they took Fallout in is such an issue is because Fallout at its core is an RPG. It doesn't matter if it's an isometric third-person view like Fallout 1 or 2, or a first-person shooter perspective like Fallout 3, New Vegas 4, and 76. It, at its core, is supposed to be a role-playing game. You design the character based on your own build, your own ideas of what your character should be like, and you interact with the world with as much freedom as a video game could possibly give you, and try to decide the fate of the wasteland. You have to interact with all these interesting and intricate characters who have their own plans and their own ideas and their own agendas with what to do. You have to make some tough decisions. You might even have to play politics a bit and go out of your way to mend the situation between two separate factions in order to make the better outcome. It's a role-playing game, but Fallout 76 isn't. They tried something new, which is commendable. It's generally a good thing when a game studio says, maybe we should try to innovate a little bit. But the way they've done so is so lackluster and half-assed that you just kind of wish they never even tried at all. Like, I honestly feel bad for people who live in West Virginia who heard, like, oh, there's gonna be a Fallout game in your state, and thinking, oh, sweet, you know, what places are they gonna have? What quests are they gonna have? Are they gonna have interesting quests surrounding some of the cryptids here, or go to some of these key locations? And then this absolute travesty is released, and every bit of hope is just sapped out. Like, literally the best thing about this game is a remake of Country Roads, and yeah, that's literally the best thing. There's literally no part of this that tops that remake. It's another case, I suppose you can say, where the advertisers have far more brains and far more money than the people actually working on the product. The thing is, though, I think Bethesda has always been kinda crap at RPGs. Like, if you compare Fallout 4 to Fallout New Vegas, the difference is night and day. The big example I would point to are the factions in the game. In Fallout New Vegas, you have 2 new factions, an independent run New Vegas where it's just your character running the show, and a returning faction. The returning faction is the NCR, who are very different than how they appeared in the previous Fallout games, when they were like just this small group in this small little, couldn't even properly call it a town. And now they're this Mojave spanning military with much more fleshed out ideals, a lot more characters, a lot more problems, a lot more quests, just a lot more going for them. The new runners-up are Kaiser's Legion and Mr. House. Those 3 factions have their own politics, they have their own allies, they have their own ideas of how the Mojave should be run, about what should happen to New Vegas itself, and their ideologies are actually fairly intricate, especially for a fucking video game. A discussion between your character and Julius Caesar, or your character and Mr. House, would delve fairly deeply into some politics and sociology and just general commentary. And that's quite fascinating. And what's even more fun than that is the fact that there's all these smaller factions that you can play politics with. There's the Great Khans, which are a returning faction. There's the Boomers. There's the Jackals. There's the Omertas and the White Gloves. All these smaller factions that your character will likely have to interact with on some level, depending on who you decide to back, because those smaller factions are going to have an impact on the larger ones and New Vegas as a whole. Now compare that with Fallout 4. What are the factions? Well, there's 4 factions again. There's none where you choose your own. Instead, there's the Minutemen, who are this group of like 6 people who quite honestly can't do shit. One of them is literally a crippled old woman who gets high on drugs and has visions. They're kinda boring. There's the Railroad, which are this group of people who have dedicated their cause to rescuing robots from slavery. In a world where literal people-based slavery still exists, there are still human beings enslaved in this wasteland, and they want to save a bunch of glorified toasters given enough transistors to be able to mimic feelings. Fucking grand. There's the Institute, which is kind of a crappier version of Mr. House. You actually become the leader of the Institute, but that means absolutely nothing. It means nothing whether your character has, say, a 9 intelligence or 1 intelligence, whether your character is this super scientist level or a literal fucking retard. Means literally nothing when you lead this underground faction of super scientists. Incredible. And since so much of the game revolves around these robots, or synths as they call it, you would think that your character leading the fucking faction that is making these things would have some impact on that, but no. Your character has no impact on how the robots operate when leading the faction that literally makes them. If I was in charge of Disney, I would have some sway in how Disney movies are made. If I was in charge of Microsoft, I would have sway over how Microsoft handles its business practices. But this underground faction that their previous leader chose you to run is basically just your leader still. You're practically just a low-level chump, just with a better name than any other low-level chump. And the fourth faction is a returning one. It's the Brotherhood of Steel. Because of course it's a Brotherhood of Steel. It's a Bethesda game. They fucking love the Brotherhood of Steel. Bethesda just sits around and think, what should we make next? Oh, how about a Fallout game? What should we have in them? Oh, I know. How's about the Brotherhood of Steel? Can't have a Fallout game without the fucking Brotherhood of Steel, now can we? In fact, we need the Brotherhood of Steel so fucking bad, let's shove them into Fallout 76 as well. Let's make it so that this Brotherhood of Steel faction that, according to the lore, kind of hold out in the wastelands of California for over a century after the bombs fell, and were generally isolationist group who rarely ventured out except to get technology, and had to be convinced to handle the issue of like this super mutant faction and all that stuff in the first game. Let's have them send out their troops all the fuck the way to West Virginia so we can have the Brotherhood of Steel in Fallout 76. Isn't that grand? We get to see Brotherhood of Steel again because Bethesda fucking loves the Brotherhood of Steel. It's a one-trick fucking pony, that company, when it comes to Fallout factions. Bloody hell, just disregard for the lore. It's as bad as a kid in the fridge from Fallout 4 if you think about it. But maybe that's a crappy example. Alright, here's another example. Here's another example that I think really shows the difference between the developers of New Vegas and the developers of Fallout 4. And that's how you handle the person you're after. In New Vegas, the game starts out with a cinematic with this guy Benny saying your character's a courier who is delivering this platinum chip. Benny intercepted you, stole the chip, shot you in the head, and left you to die in an empty grave. So you wake up in Doc Mitchell's house, he patched you up, and you immediately set out to find Benny. You eventually go down to New Vegas, you enter the Tops Casino, and you see Benny there. Now, here's all the different ways I can think of on the top of my head of how you can handle Benny. Now, the first way is when you go into a casino, a guy greeting you says you have to turn in all your weapons. However, if you have a high enough sneak, you can sneak in a small silenced pistol, and you can actually shoot the greeter in the head while hidden from anyone else, and retrieve your weapons from behind his counter, and then use any of those in order to attack Benny. Alternatively, you can decline his invite to peacefully take your weapons as part of a user's agreement of entering the casino, and just go in guns blazing, although that would cause everyone else to shoot at you, but you can still kill Benny. That's two ways so far and Benny doesn't even know you're there, or doesn't know until bullets are starting to fly over his head. Now, if you go near him, he'll be alerted of you, and he'll try to convince you to go up to his room, and if you do so, he'll send in some of his goons to shoot at you, and you have to kill them and chase after him. However, with a high enough speech skill, you can convince him to come along with you to your room, or to his room, and kill him there. Or if you're a female courier with the Black Widow perk, you can convince him to sleep with you, and then you can either take the platinum chip from him while he's sleeping, or kill him in his sleep and take the platinum chip. So that's 3 ways. Or if you have a stealth boy, which is this item that makes you completely invisible, you can sneak up behind him and pickpocket the platinum chip from him and sneak away. Or you can shoot him like that, while invisible. Now, if you aren't able to do any of that, or you don't want to do any of that, that's not how you want to play the game, then Benny will send his goons over, like mentioned before, and you have to kill them. And then he will flee to the area Kaiser's Legion is camped at, and he'll be captured by them, and he'll be tied up in Kaiser's tent. And when you meet Kaiser, he'll ask what you want to do with him. And your options are shoot him while he's tied up. You can untie him and let him escape, where he'll be killed by Kaiser's Legion because they see him running away. You can give him a stealth boy, in which case he'll be able to escape from Kaiser's Legion safely. You can ask Kaiser to crucify him, or if you're a male courier, you can fight you can fight Benny in the arena and take him down in hand-to-hand combat. So that right there are 12 ways that I remember you're able to handle who, for the first half of the game, is like your main focus. This character who wronged you. You can choose a peaceful solution, you can choose a sneaky solution, you can choose a violent solution, you can humiliate him, you can fucking have him crucified if you want. You can just keep punching him to death while he's tied up in Kaiser's tent. You can go invisible and, sneak a grenade in his back pocket and try to sneak away before it blows up. There's just so many ways you can handle this one asshole who's so integral to the story. So what's it like with Fallout 4? Well, there's actually sort of a Benny with Fallout 4. The game more or less actually starts when you're inside the vault and you're in this cryogenic pod and you're frozen. Then you're temporarily unfrozen and this guy comes out. His name is Kellogg, like the cereal. He comes out and he opens your wife or husband's pod, depending on what sex you choose, and he shoots your spouse and he steals your baby, and then he runs away. And eventually you track him down to this military facility. He has a small army of robots with him. How do you handle Kellogg? Well, you can shoot him in the face. You can shoot him in the leg. You can shoot a fat man at him. You can shoot fire at him. You can shoot junk at him. You can, in general, shoot at him, but the confrontation is always going to be the exact same. You meet him face to face, you exchange a few words, and then you shoot him. The only different option you have is to shoot him before that conversation. That brings it up to about 2 ways. There's no peaceful resolution in Fallout 4. There's nothing like the many options you have with New Vegas, when it comes to how to handle this opponent who has crossed your path and caused such calamity and harm to your person or your family. It's just kill this enemy and then go back to some other location, very similar to a lot of the other quests in Fallout 4. It has no branch off and lacks so much imagination compared to the game that came before it. You have to wonder if Bethesda was paying at all attention to what Obsidian was able to do with Fallout New Vegas, that they came up with something so lackluster. Now, I'm not the only person to complain about this. There's been numerous complaints about Fallout 4 from Fallout and RPG fans. The aforementioned boring quests and lore-breaking issues. There's a really crappy dialogue system that's restricted to 4 and only 4 and always 4 options. That's this sort of a Mass Effect dialogue system where you have like the briefest of synopsis of what the choice will be, and then your voice protagonist says the whole thing when you pick it. That caused a lot of ire and spite from Fallout fans because it kind of removed so many options from Fallout 4 compared to previous Fallout games. For example, there's no longer any skill checks in your dialogues. Having a high science or high medicine or high barter or anything like that means absolutely nothing when talking to any of the characters throughout the wasteland. And Fallout 76 almost seems like Bethesda's response to all of these criticisms. And it's the exact opposite of what their response should be. You think the quests are boring? Well, now they're even worse because there's no characters. It's all these pre-recorded audio logs you have to listen to. Oh, you think the dialogue in the game was bad? Well, now we don't have any, other than these like fucking Fortnite emote dances or whatever. Or you can use voice chat, but just be aware if you use voice chat, then everyone on the server will always hear you as long as your mic is turned on. There's no push to talk, which has existed for over a decade now. Whether you're talking with someone else, or you're coughing, or maybe you rip ass so loud your mic can pick it up, the whole fucking wasteland will hear you. Just bad decision after bad decision after a game that already has so many issues from an RPG standpoint. It's almost like the idea of making a proper RPG is so daunting that they cowered completely and thought, well, maybe we should try a different genre. Let's try to make our broken, rusted out game engine work with a multiplayer PvP when all it was making was these subpar RPGs for so long. And that's another complaint people have with Fallout 76, the game engine. Gamebryo, or the creation engine as they now call it, has really overstayed its welcome. Now it's true, a lot of video game companies tend to reuse the same engine for a long while. The thing is, those other game companies really augment their engine with each iteration to the point where it's fairly unrecognizable as the engine of the previous game. Unless it's a yearly installment like the Assassin's Creed games were, where that's not very likely. But even as the recent Assassin's Creed Odyssey is a very different game than, say, Assassin's Creed Syndicate or even Assassin's Creed Origins. But Bethesda games have always sort of played the same. They generally look the same with a little bit higher graphical fidelity, and they sure as shit have the same bugs. The same sort of bugs that were found in Oblivion can be found in Fallout 76, making it very evident that the issue is literally the game engine itself. The the framework of the game is problematic. And people want Bethesda to change it, and then news came out that Stellaris or Starfield, that's what it is, Starfield, and Elder Scrolls 6 are also going to be using this game engine. And after the absolute shit show that was Fallout 76, you could imagine just how tired people were and how much they didn't want to hear that. Like, even before Fallout 76 came out, people were saying that they better use a different engine or really, really change it for Elder Scrolls 6. Or they're just not going to get it. I hope they stick by their word. Though if there's one thing you can't really trust the gaming community on, it's to successfully host a boycott or a protest. Another thing I've noticed, and there's actually a video about Fallout 76 that's a compilation of the bugs and glitches in the game, and at the very end it's a cross comparison between the dragon fight in Skyrim and the Scorched Beast fight, this giant bat thing that shoots radiation rings at you in Fallout 76. It was playing the theme song to Skyrim over it, and basically saying that this fight is just the dragon fight from Skyrim. You have no idea how happy I was to know that someone else has noticed that. Literally, from the first trailer of Fallout 76, the first time I saw that giant bat thing, I absolutely knew. That's just a fucking dragon. Why is there a goddamn dragon in my Fallout game? What are you doing, Bethesda? Well, they can't let go of Skyrim. And I don't mean it from like the, haha, Bethesda releases Skyrim every day, Todd Howard's gonna bust down your door, point a gun at your head and say, buy Skyrim again. No, I mean like from their gameplay perspective, when making new games, it's kind of showing that they're not going to let go of Skyrim. They're going to keep reusing the sort of imagery, the sort of gameplay, the simplicity compared to previous installations in the Elder Scrolls series, and shove it into Fallout. They'll shove it into Starfield, and they'll shove it into Elder Scrolls 6. It won't really be Elder Scrolls 6, it'll be more like Elder Scrolls 5 Part 2. Bethesda is really showing itself to be a one-trick pony, and a very lazy one at that. They are indeed a lazy company. This is one of the laziest companies you can ever come across. How the hell does a AAA game release a game, a AAA studio release a game this fucking broken at launch? How do they not delay it? How do they like fucking throw their hands up and say, yeah, we'll release it in this state? I mean, they could have delayed it, and it would even work in their favor, because then it wouldn't be in the same fucking release window as Red Dead Redemption 2, which is one of the biggest releases of the year. It literally could have helped their sales to delay it a little bit to fix up some of these glaring issues, but they were too fucking lazy and stubborn to even do what's right for themselves. And they just, I guess, lack imagination. They lack passion, that's it. I feel like I'm Gordon Ramsay at this point, yelling at some chef who, managed to burn a salad and expects to be paid for it. You lack fucking passion. That's just it. They have no love for this art. They have no interest in making a good game. I'm aware the gaming industry is a business, but if your only goal is to make money, all you're going to produce is shit. Absolute bestsellers that are adored by millions were made, yes, because the people who made them need to put bread on a table, but they were made because they had an interesting idea and wanted to see it executed. They wanted to make sure all the little details were right. They want to make sure it was a phenomenal experience and one that will live down. And Bethesda, they clearly just didn't give a shit when making this game. If Todd Howard isn't lying, which would be a fucking first, and it turned out every single studio in Bethesda, every building they have, had some hand in developing this game, that is fucking sad. That's about the saddest thing you can ever hear in the gaming industry. Like, all those people ended up producing this. It's like watching a really shitty movie and then watching through the credits and seeing the names of all these people who wasted their time, who probably could have done something else with their talents. But this is the path the universe took, I guess. This is the end result of this little thing. Bethesda's facing a lawsuit, I guess. I honestly don't think it'll go anywhere, but I guess it's kind of telling that there's now lawsuits being talked about. And I kind of hope it does go through, because quite honestly, the book needs to be thrown at these companies for their anti-consumer practices. It's just shitty. And it's really shitty because I actually really like the Fallout franchise. I would spend hours reading through all these articles on the Fallout wiki, learning about the lore, learning about the themes and philosophies of the game, learning about the games I haven't played, learning about the games I have played, just trying to take in as much information about this amazing series. There's gonna be other RPGs, yes. I'm looking forward to Cyberpunk 2077, but I'm going to be completely frank here. I'm a much bigger fan of the retro future 1950s atomic punk aesthetic than I am of cyberpunk aesthetics. So even Cyberpunk wouldn't necessarily be able to fill in that good Fallout game-shaped hole I have in my heart as of late. And I'm not sure anything will. It certainly won't be another Fallout game by Bethesda. They've shown themselves to be fucking incapable. I was actually a little bit interested in Starfield. Finally got right that time. I was thinking, oh, there's a new RPG. Maybe a fresh idea will really invigorate the company to make a proper one. Maybe they'll learn a bunch from Fallout 4 and correct those mistakes with it. But then once I heard that the same game engine is being used for it, that there's no interest at all. I see no reason to keep up to date with it. I see no reason to follow it. I see no reason to check periodically. I'll check periodically with Scorn. I'll check periodically with Atomic Heart. I'll check periodically with Cyberpunk 2077. And any of these other games that look like they might be decent because the game companies who are making them aren't lazy, uninspired bastards. But certainly not this game that Bethesda is going to release that initially had my attention. And though I take no interest in medieval fantasy settings, even if I did, even if I was all about that, I still wouldn't buy Elder Scrolls 6. And actually I had to pause for a brief second because I was about to call it Skyrim 6. I might as well just call it that. What's the fucking point? They're just going to try to re-release Skyrim again. It's amazing. You get to live long enough to see all these franchises you love just turn to shit. And there's such scarcity with new franchises, with anything new and interesting, that the amount of avenues to explore and, delve deep in as an escape from the cold, harsh, shitty reality we live in is dwindling ever more. So yeah, I think I've said about all I can say about this. I've rambled on for so long. I'd like to know what you think. What's your opinion on Fallout 76 or Bethesda as a company? Or if you don't comment or haven't even watched or whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, I hope you enjoyed the video anyways. I gave you something to think about and otherwise entertained you in ways that a T-posing scorched, not a ghoul, they're called scorched and they can use guns. That's how you know they're not ghouls, even though they look literally the exact same as ghouls. A T-posing scorched clipping through your shitty cobbled together base couldn't provide. Take care.